She came into this town with nothing but a worn-out dress, a small leather bag, and a little girl holding her hand so tight it left marks on her fingers. Nobody looked at her the way people look at someone who belongs somewhere. They looked at her the way people look at something they are not sure should be there at all. A few women on the main street whispered behind gloved hands. A shopkeeper watched her from behind his window glass. A little boy pointed at her shoes, the ones with the sole barely held on by a piece of wire she had wrapped around it herself the night before. Her name was Clara Holt. She was 29 years old, and she had run out of road. She had come to Harlan Creek, Texas, answering a newspaper advertisement for a position as a laundress at a boarding house. It was not a glamorous life she was reaching for. She was not dreaming of ballrooms or silk ribbons. She just needed a room, a meal, and a reason to keep walking forward. She had her daughter Rosie to think about. Rosie was 5, with her mother's brown eyes and her late father's stubborn little chin, and she trusted Clara the way only a child can trust someone, completely, without question, without condition. That kind of trust is the heaviest thing in the world when you are not sure you deserve it. Before you keep listening, if stories like this one touch something deep in your heart, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Every week we bring you slow, warm, emotional Western romance stories made just for you. Now let us get back to Clara. She had not always been this poor. There was a time, not so long ago, when she had a home. A small one, but real. Her husband James had worked the land outside of Beaumont, a decent man, not a rich one, but honest. When the fever came through 2 winters back, it took James in 11 days. It took their savings in the weeks that followed, between the doctor and the burial and the landlord who did not wait a month before asking for rent she no longer had. Her family back in Georgia, what was left of them, had made it clear without saying it plainly that a widow with a child and no money was a burden they were not prepared to carry. Her mother had said, "Clara, you are a strong woman. You will find your way." What she meant was, do not come here. So Clara did not go there. She went forward instead, town to town, doing washing and mending and whatever honest work she could find, always sending a letter ahead to ask about positions, always trying to arrive somewhere that expected her. Harlan Creek was supposed to be that somewhere. She had the reply letter in her bag, creased and soft from how many times she had read it on the long stage ride. A letter from a Mrs. Beaufort who ran the boarding house and said the position was hers if she arrived before the 1st of the month. She arrived on the 31st. Mrs. Beaufort met her at the door with an expression that said the decision had already been made. Standing beside her was a younger woman, plump and well-dressed, with smooth hands that had never seen a washboard. Mrs. Beaufort said very kindly, very firmly, that the position had been filled just that morning. Her niece had come unexpectedly from Austin and needed the work. Clara stood there on the porch with Rosie beside her and the afternoon sun going sideways behind the hills, and she felt something hollow open up in her chest. She thanked Mrs. Beaufort. She picked up her bag. She walked back down the porch steps. Rosie said quietly, "Mama, where are we going?" Clara said, "I am thinking on it, baby." She sat down on the bench outside the general store because her legs were tired and because she did not know what else to do. She had $4.30 in her pocket. She had not eaten since the morning. Rosie leaned against her side and after a while fell asleep sitting up, her small head warm and heavy against Clara's arm. That was when he saw her. His name was Eli Hardin. He was 34 years old, and he had the look of a man who had spent most of those years outside, weathered and quiet, with dark eyes that did not linger on people unless something in them caught his attention. He ran the Hardin Ranch about 4 miles north of town, a working cattle operation that his father had built and that he had inherited along with a mountain of debt and a reputation for keeping to himself. He was not unfriendly, he was just private. People in Harlan Creek respected him the way you respect a fence post. It is always there, it holds the line. It does not ask for conversation. He had come to town for feed and a new length of rope. He was loading the wagon when he looked across the street and saw the woman on the bench with the sleeping child pressed against her, and the look on her face stopped him cold. He had seen tired before. He had seen worried before. He had even seen beaten before, on his own face, in the mirror, in the year after his wife Margaret had died of a difficult birth that took her and the baby both, leaving him alone in a house that still smelled like her for months. He knew what it looked like when a person was holding themselves together through sheer stubbornness because there was nothing else left to hold on to. He looked away. He finished loading the rope. He told himself it was none of his concern. Then Rosie woke up and said, loud enough to carry across the quiet street, "Mama, my tummy hurts." And Clara said, soft and breaking just slightly at the edge, "I know, sweetheart. I know." Eli Hardin stood beside his wagon for a long moment. Then he crossed the street. He did not introduce himself with charm or flourish. He took his hat off, held it in both hands, and said, "Excuse me, ma'am. You look like you might be needing some supper." Clara looked up at him with the particular wariness of a woman who has learned that kindness from strangers usually comes attached to something. She said, "We are fine, thank you." He said, "I did not ask if you were fine. I asked if you needed supper." There was no meanness in it, just honesty. She was so tired of people dancing around the truth that his directness hit her somewhere unexpected, somewhere soft. She said, "I have money." He said, "I did not say you did not. I said I am offering." He looked at Rosie. "She is hungry, and so are you, I expect." Clara sat very still for a moment. Then she said, "All right." He fed them at the diner on Main Street, the kind of place with oilcloth on the tables and a pie shelf behind the counter. He sat across from them and did not ask questions, just let them eat, which Clara later decided was the kindest thing anyone had done for her in 2 years. Rosie ate a whole bowl of beef stew and half a piece of cornbread, and then looked at Eli Hardin with the frank assessment only children can deliver and said, "You have a nice face." He looked surprised. He said, "Thank you." Rosie said, "You look like you are sad, though." Clara started to apologize. He shook his head gently and said, "She is right. I am, a little." He said it simply, like it was just a fact about the weather. After supper, he walked them outside, and Clara thanked him and explained her situation briefly, without drama, the way people explain hard things when they have explained them enough times to stop crying about them. She told him about the boarding house position, about arriving 1 day late, about not knowing yet where she would spend the night. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that changed everything. He said, "I have a ranch north of town. It is a working cattle operation, nothing fancy. I have a spare room and a house that has not had a cook or anyone to keep it right in about 2 years. I cannot pay much, but I can pay something, and there is a room for you and your girl, and it is honest work if you want it." Clara looked at him carefully. She said, "I do not know you." He said, "No, you do not. My name is Eli Hardin, and I have lived in this county my whole life, and you can ask anyone in that diner about my character. I am not offering anything except work and a roof. Nothing else is on the table, and nothing else will be." She asked 3 people in that diner. They all said the same thing. He is a quiet man. He is a good man. He keeps to himself. He has not been the same since his wife passed, but he is decent through and through. She took the job. The ranch was nothing like she expected, and exactly like she should have expected from a man like him. It was functional, strong in its bones, but empty in its spirit. The kitchen was clean but bare. The sitting room had a good fireplace and a single chair pulled close to it. There were no curtains on the windows. There were no flowers, no small touches that make a house feel like it is loved. It was the home of someone who was surviving in it, not living in it. Rosie walked through the front door and said, "It needs some fixing up." Eli looked down at her. He said, "I expect it does." Clara settled them into the spare room, a simple space with a good bed and a window that looked out over the east pasture where the light came in gold every morning. She lay awake that first night listening to Rosie breathe and feeling, for the first time in months, that the ground beneath her was not going to disappear while she slept. She started cooking the next morning before he was awake, made biscuits from the flour she found in the pantry, fried salt pork, put the coffee on. When Eli came in from the early milking, he stopped in the kitchen doorway and looked at the table set with food and steam rising from the cup she had poured, and something crossed his face that she could not read yet. It was not quite surprise, it was softer than that. He sat down and said, "Thank you." She said, "It is what you hired me for." He said, "I know. I am thanking you anyway." The days built on each other slowly, the way trust builds, not in big moments but in small ones. She learned that he woke before dawn every day without exception. He learned that she sang quietly to Rosie at bedtime, old songs she half remembered from her own childhood. She learned that he ate whatever was put in front of him without complaint, no matter how plain. He learned that she was stronger than she looked, that she could carry twice what he expected, that she did not ask for help unless she had already tried 3 other ways first. Rosie attached herself to him with the particular devotion of a child who recognizes something real. She followed him to the barn in the mornings, asking questions about every animal. He answered each one with patience, never shortened, never spoken down. He taught her how to hold her hand flat when feeding a horse a piece of apple. He fixed her rag doll when its arm came loose, sitting at the kitchen table with a needle and thread with his big hands working carefully around the small seam. Clara watched him do that and felt something shift in her chest that she told herself firmly was just gratitude. Then November came in hard and cold, and with it, trouble. There was a man named Gerald Pickett who had been wanting the North water rights that bordered the Hardin Ranch for 3 years. He had money and he had lawyers, and he had the kind of patience that comes from being used to getting things eventually. He had been pressuring Eli quietly for a long time, and when Eli would not sell, the pressure changed shape. Pickett started telling people in town that Eli Hardin was running an improper household, that he had a woman living at his ranch who was not his wife, that it was a scandal and a shame, and that perhaps the county ought to look into whether a man of such questionable character should hold title to water rights at all. It was the kind of damage that is hard to fight because it moves faster than truth. Clara heard about it from the woman at the dry goods store who told her with a mixture of genuine sympathy and obvious curiosity. She walked back to the ranch with Rosie's hand in hers and her jaw set, and when she told Eli that evening what was being said, he went very still in the way that she had come to recognize as him being deeply angry, but unwilling to show it carelessly. He said, "I am sorry, Clara. That is my fault for not thinking ahead." She said, "It is his fault for being a liar." He said, "Yes, but I am the one who should have thought to protect you from it." There was a silence between them, not uncomfortable, just full. Then he said, without looking at her directly, studying the table in front of him, "There is one way to stop it cold, but I will not ask it of you, and if you say no, we will find another way." She said, "Say it plainly." He looked up then. He said, "If we were married, there would be nothing for him to use. It would be legal, clear, and quiet. I am not asking for anything else to change. I would not make demands on you or press you toward anything you did not want. You would have your room, your work, your place here as long as you needed it. I just think you deserve better than having your name dragged through town mud because of a grudge that belongs to me." Clara was quiet for a long time. She said, "Eli, I did not come here looking to trap a man into anything." He said, "I know that." She said, "And I will not be a burden to you." He said, very quietly, "Clara, you have not been a burden to me for a single day since you walked through that door. You have been the first thing in 2 years that made this house feel like something other than a place where I sleep." She married him on a Thursday at the county courthouse, with Rosie holding a bunch of dried wildflowers she had picked from along the fence line and the judge's wife as the witness. It was not a romantic wedding. It was practical and simple, and when the judge said the words and Eli took her hand and held it, not squeezing, just holding, steady and sure, Clara felt something in her chest crack open like spring ice. It was not love, she let herself call it. Not yet. It was safety. And safety, when you have been without it long enough, feels so much like love that it is very difficult to tell the difference. Pickett did not give up easily. A week after the wedding, one of the ranch hands found the east fence line cut in 3 places and 6 head of cattle missing. 2 nights later, someone started a fire in the dry grass near the south barn. Eli put it out himself with the ranch hand Domingo's help, beating it back with wet burlap in the dark while Clara stood at the house with Rosie behind her, holding a lantern with steady hands, watching the orange glow in the south field, her heart hammering but her feet planted. When Eli came back to the house at midnight, face black with smoke, she met him at the door with water and a cloth and started cleaning the soot from his face without speaking, and he let her. And they stood in the kitchen doorway in the quiet dark, and neither of them said anything because there was nothing to say that the moment was not already saying. She woke the next morning to find he had ridden into town before dawn and filed a formal complaint with the county sheriff and 2 witnesses who had seen Pickett's men near the fence line. The sheriff, a fair man named Cole, took it seriously. By the end of the week, Pickett had a court summons and the kind of legal trouble that made quiet men with money get suddenly very interested in leaving other people alone. The day the summons was served, Clara was at the kitchen table helping Rosie write her letters on a piece of brown paper. Eli came in and told her what had happened, and Rosie climbed down from her chair and wrapped both arms around his leg the way she had started doing, just holding on for a moment, and then went back to her letters. Eli looked at Clara over the top of Rosie's head, and there was something in his eyes that she had been watching grow for weeks, something warm and bewildered and careful, like a man who has forgotten what it feels like to have something worth protecting and is only just now remembering. Clara said, "Thank you for fighting for this." He said, "I would fight for a lot harder than this." She understood what he meant. She looked down at the table. She felt the heat of it in her face and her hands, and she was glad Rosie was there as a reason to look somewhere else. December settled over the ranch with snow and silence and the particular intimacy of people living close together in the cold. One evening after Rosie was in bed, they sat together by the fire, not talking, just sitting, and after a long while Eli said, quietly, not looking at her, "I did not think I would ever want this again." She said, "Want what?" He said, "This. Quiet like this. Someone else in the room." She said, "I know what you mean." He turned and looked at her then, just looked, and she looked back. And there was no pretending in it and no hurrying it, just two people who had both lost a great deal looking at each other across a firelit room, and knowing, without needing to say it all at once, that something real had grown up between them in the slow, honest days of an ordinary life shared. He said, "Clara." She said, "I know, Eli." He reached over and took her hand, the same way he had held it at the courthouse, steady and sure, and this time she turned her hand over and held his back. They did not say the big words that night. They did not need to. The fire crackled, and the wind moved across the roof, and somewhere in the spare room that was no longer a spare room but Rosie's room, the little girl slept safely, and that was enough. More than enough. Spring came, and with it new cabs and a kitchen garden that Clara planted along the south wall of the house, with Rosie digging the rows beside her, getting more dirt on herself than in the ground, and Eli leaning on the fence watching them with an expression on his face that the old Eli Hardin would not have recognized as belonging to himself. On a warm April evening, Rosie looked up from her supper and said to Eli, completely without preamble, "Can I call you Papa?" The table went very quiet. Eli set down his fork. He looked at Rosie for a long time. His voice, when it came, was low and a little unsteady. He said, "I would be real honored if you did." Rosie nodded, satisfied, and went back to her supper. Clara stared very hard at the window. She was crying, and she did not want to cry at the table, so she pressed her lips together and looked at the last of the April light going pink over the east pasture, and she thought about how long the road had been, how many nights she had sat in the dark wondering if the ground would hold, how many times she had told Rosie it would be all right without knowing if that was true. It was true. It had become true. Not all at once and not without pain, but in the slow, honest way that real things become real. Later that night, after Rosie was asleep, Eli found Clara on the porch watching the stars come out, and he stood beside her and she leaned just slightly into his arm, and he put that arm around her and said, quiet as a man who means every word he does not say out loud, "I am glad you came to this town, Clara." She said, "I came too late for the only job I came for." He said, "No, I think you came exactly on time." She looked up at him. He looked down at her. And in the soft dark of a Texas spring night, with the land quiet around them and a little girl sleeping inside who had just given her papa his name, he kissed her gently, and she let herself, finally, come home. Not to a place, to a person. To a life she had not planned but that fit her better than anything she had ever reached for. She had come to Harlan Creek with $4 and a broken soul, and a little girl who trusted her completely. She had been turned away, looked past, whispered about, and called too poor to matter. And a quiet man with sad eyes and steady hands had looked across the street and seen her anyway. If this story moved you, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me what part touched your heart the most. Tell me where you are watching from tonight, Whether it is Texas or Tennessee or somewhere far across the ocean, I love hearing from every one of you. And if you believe a good woman deserves to be chosen, to be seen, to finally come home, subscribe to this channel and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. There are more stories waiting for you here, slow and warm and made with love, just like this one.